Listen, I know I said the last video would be the last one on Kyle Busch, but for God's sakes, just new stuff keeps popping up. I'm sorry, alright? It's not my fault. You have so many things pointing in other different directions that we just have to cover it. Every single week, it's something with Kyle Busch. Before it was colleague, then it was 2311. Now RCR is apparently one of the favorites according to Adam Stern. Although the team president made no comment on it, the fact that Adam Stern is saying that RCR is one of the favorites, and considering that a couple weeks ago, Richard Childress, when asked about would Kyle Busch be in consideration of joining the team, Richard didn't deny it. He didn't add on anything to it, but he didn't deny it, saying, "You said it, not me," you know? So the fact that Adam's reporting this as a favorite for RCR to land Kyle Busch, we have to talk about it. Also considering the fact that they're considering that 2311 may also be an option for Kyle, which is very interesting because we still don't know what the timeline is regarding Kurt Busch. It all revolves around Kurt Busch. If Kurt Busch returns next year, then for 2311 would have to open up a third car. And Denny Hamlin has said that he doesn't want to do that, at least not yet, until he knows what the new TV deal looks like in 2025. So that part is still a bit murky, but with RCR apparently is now one of the favorites. Now keep in mind, RCR and colleague, they do have a connection, they do have a partnership. So if Kyle Busch were to be talking with colleague, more than likely he would also be talking with RCR about joining the team. There's also this tweet from NASCAR Prophecy that, again, take with a grain of salt because I'm pretty sure he said he has a solid source, but doesn't name the source, so can't really rely on it, so take with a grain of salt. But apparently, according to him, it says that Kyle Busch is officially not allowed at any of Toyota's future private sessions for the remainder of the season. So, but again, take that with a grain of salt. But not only is Adam Stern reporting this, but also Bob Pockrass. Bob Pockrass is also stating that RCR is a favorite for Kyle Busch to land in 2023. But in order to do that, RCR would have to acquire a third charter. That's right. Before, we were considering that if Kyle Busch were to go to RCR, it would be a driver swap, where Busch would take over Reddick and Reddick would take over Busch's ride in the 18 car, since Richard has stated that he wants Reddick gone, or at least I shouldn't say stated, but a source from someone inside RCR has reported that RC wants Reddick gone as soon as possible. So that's why that whole, possibility of a driver swap taking place. Well, now it seems that if RCR were to get Kyle Busch, they would have to acquire a third charter. Now, obviously, that's going to require a lot of pockets, a lot of money. I don't think RCR, even though I know Kyle Busch took a pay cut to be able to afford Kyle Busch and to get a sponsor to be able to help with that money for Kyle Busch, it's going to take a lot of cash. Now, Kyle Busch did send Twitter into a bit of a frenzy by sending out this tweet, adding Apple about whether or not he should be a product tester for the new iPhone 14. More than likely, Kyle Busch is in his trolley mood, but regardless, it did got a lot of people on social media talking about, hey, is this a potential? Is this, a little bit of a tease? But regardless, it would have to require a brand new sponsor for Kyle Busch if RCR wants to get a third charter. It'd be a lot easier just to take the sponsors from Reddick and give it to Kyle Busch. But if Reddick is staying for 2023, then you're going to need to find a whole new sponsor to be able to afford Kyle Busch. Because, looking at charters now, we're talking about an excess of $20 million just to get the charter. That's not even including Kyle Busch. That's not including none of that. Just to get the charter is already more than plus $20 million, which is mental. So to find a new sponsor is almost a requirement now in order to get Kyle Busch, compared to, let's say, colleague, where they already have a charter and they have some sponsors lined up. They can create a plan to build around Kyle Busch to be able to get him. With RCR, you need to get a charter and get sponsors. Now, this could also be setting up for the future, quite possibly, because let's say in a scenario that, let's say, all right, Kyle Busch, he does go to RCR in 2023, Reddick goes to 2011 and 2024. Well, now you have two full-time drivers and a third charter still up for grabs. You can easily take out one of the drivers from the Xfinity Series. More than likely would be Austin Hill. Hill already made his first Cup start earlier in the year in Michigan, and I think he finished inside the top 20, had a very solid debut race. You could easily pull up one of those drivers. You could maybe pull up Sheldon Creed, but Austin Hill has more experience and more than likely would be the one to move from Xfinity to Cup under the RCR banner. The way I look at Kyle Busch's future between these three teams, between Kaulig, RCR, and 2311 Racing is this. If he goes to 2311 Racing, he's more than likely going to get the same type of performance. You know, he's going to be still under the Toyota banner, going to keep that relationship with KBM. Everything will be a lot smoother if he stays under the Toyota banner, and will have the same amount of performance or relatively close compared to when he was at Joe Gibbs Racing. If he goes to RCR, on the other hand, now RCR is in a different position because maybe Chevrolet could offer more since you're getting a marquee driver in Kyle Busch and getting a top-notch truck series team in KBM. You could be able to offer more money. Chevrolet could offer more money to be able to bring Kyle Busch over to their camp. The only thing is that with RCR compared to 2011 Racing, you're not going to get the same performance level. Outside of Reddick, RCR has been pretty garbage. I mean, look at Austin Dillon at Darlington. It's pretty obvious that Richard Childress Racing is nowhere near not even an A- team, probably a B+ team. So that's the only thing you have to consider. Now with Kaulig is not where RCR is right now. Kaulig is a startup team. You know, they still got to iron some things out. I think they can be a race winning team down the line, but at the moment, they're not a race winning team. However, going to Kaulig would grant Kyle Busch security. Because obviously, if you go to a startup team, they're going to make sure you stay with them. So they would more than likely offer Kyle Busch a long-term deal, maybe even part ownership with Kaulig Racing in the Xfinity level. Because remember, Kyle Busch has talked about him and his son Brexton. You know, he wants to race with his son, wants to help him get a pathway in NASCAR. So going to Kaulig would grant him security not only for the rest of his driving career, but also grant him security for his future and for his son's potential NASCAR career. So those are the situations you have to consider with those three options. 2011 Racing, get performance, stay under the Toyota banner. With RCR, new change of, if Toyota doesn't work out, RCR would be better than Kaulig in terms of performance, but going to Kaulig would grant you security. And may not be performance-wise, but it would grant you security for the long term. Because if you get Kaulig, if Kaulig gets Kyle Busch, you're not going to let him go. And Kyle Busch has stated he doesn't want to go through this process again for the rest of his career. And Kaulig would more than likely grant him a long-term deal so that he can comfortably stay with the team for as long as he wants. I still have a feeling though that Kyle Busch is going to Kaulig just because it makes sense based off of the future of his Cup Series career. 2011 looks a bit murky because again, it all depends on Kurt Busch and that whole deal. I think the best option would be Kaulig. I think so. Dale Jr. also thinks more than likely he's going to go to Kaulig. And again, I talked about that announcement in the previous Kyle Busch update. I think it was on October 5th, I believe it was. I still believe that could be a great opportunity for Kyle Busch to reveal that that's where he's going to be driving for in 2023. I still think it's Kaulig. If you look at the circumstances that surround each team, Kyle Busch's best option. If it's not Toyota and Joe Gibbs Racing, it's Kaulig. Kaulig is the best option. I know RCR, they're looking at opening a charter, and that could still be a possibility that he could go to RCR. But I think just in terms of the circumstances that surround Kaulig Racing, it would be best for Kyle to go to Kaulig.